Here we are at chapter 15. This is the Renaissance and Reformation. And what is really important with the Renaissance and Reformation is the people, the change in people's attitudes, what their focus was on. All throughout the Middle Ages, pretty much everyone in Europe was worried about religion. That was the center of their life, how they were doing things. It determined what they were going to choose to do, when they were going to do it, and who had power. Now, the Renaissance is about the change in people, the change in focus from just religion to this new the belief in people, that people could do things, and that had some to do with the questions about the Pope and the Church, whether they actually had the best interest of the people in mind and whether they could be trusted. So people started to look for other places to consider for truth. I, what comes about from this is the look back to the past, the classics, the look back to Greece, the look back to Rome. Now, the Renaissance starts in Italy, and that's not a big surprise because the people living in Italy are close to Rome. They're close to these huge ruins, the 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 leftovers from the city of Rome. They didn't live in Rome. That had been kind of abandoned. Rome, even though it was a giant space with tons and tons of really amazing architecture, people had moved away from that city because of all of the problems that had gone on actually almost 1,000 years before at that point. But they are nearby. They see the aqueducts, they see the Colosseum and the temples and the government buildings, and these people in 1300 or so are looking at them going, wow, these are huge, these are amazing. What did these people do? How did they do that? We don't have anything like that. Something must have been going right for them. So the Renaissance uh, it begins in Italy, and that's one of our main focus here is why was Italy the birthplace of the Renaissance? Why did it start there? And then how were literature and art changed during the Renaissance? So that's what we're looking at here in section 1. That it started in Italy, and that's because they were right there close to Rome. They saw what the Romans had done, and they knew that the Romans had been influenced by the Greeks, and so they started to do research, to go look at things from the past. Well, so we're beginning here with this change, the return to those classics, looking at Greece and Rome, nature and beauty. And the Middle Ages had been very focused on religion and survival. Cultural change started in Italy, a town called Florence. So we're looking at a couple of cities here, like we use us here in Ohio, right there where the hand is. Italy, up to the top, like we're
Italy was a space for things to change because they were trading with the people of the Middle East. Much more difficult for the Germans nobles moved to cities to make money. They could make money from trade. And that was all because of the Crusades. They knew that people were traveling back and forth, that they liked some of the things that they came across in the Crusades, and being able to be a part of that trade route meant that they could get money out of it. And so the nobles didn't want to live out in the country on a feudal estate anymore. They needed to be in a place where they could run the trade, and so they come back into the nearby cities and control the trade. Because of that, because these nobles are coming back, they're making a lot of money in the trade, they are able to really make their little towns into city-states, very much like Greece. They weren't kings, they were just the nobles, they were the local leaders, but they controlled not just the town, but they controlled all the land around the town, because the land around the town was used to support the people in the town. So the city was independent, and then the land around it was used to support it. Now, these people were very much Catholic, strong Catholic beliefs. So the Pope did have some influence over them, but they had a lot of money. So, like a lot of the kings in medieval Europe, they didn't feel like they had to listen to the Pope all the time. They believed in Christ. They believed in heaven and hell, and they didn't question that part of it. But the question was, does the Pope really have the power that he says he does? And so they had a lot of money, and they could give money to the church, and the Pope would listen to them too. So it was much more of a give and take than what had been in the Middle Ages. Humanism. We've talked about this return to the classics, Greece and Rome. Now, humanism is that interest in the classics, and that's one of your vocabulary words. And then there is this offshoot called Christian humanism. It applies humanist ideas to Christianity. The classics focused a lot on nature and beauty and people. They wanted to look at things naturally. So they spent a lot of time in their art really putting lots of specific detail and natural detail. They start to have some ideas in their art of three dimensions. The art of the Middle Ages had been very flat and boring, and the art of the Renaissance, you start to see depth, because they wanted things to look real. The humanists would have been ecstatic about the idea of photography, where you don't have to try to recreate it. All you have to do is capture it. And then Christian humanism applies humanist ideas to Christianity. And so that's why you start to get a lot of art depicting Jesus and his suffering, and it's very, very graphic. They're using humanist ideas that look back at ancient Greek and Roman text and art to indicate Christianity, the scenes that people know. Now, I've said that it is very important to recognize the people of the Renaissance. And they tend to be artists and writers and thinkers. And so a couple of these guys that we need to consider. Petrarch. Petrarch was a writer, and he focused a lot on the Greek and Roman writing. He would read Aristotle and Socrates. He would read the works of the great orators, Cicero in Rome, Caesar. He looked to them for information, for ideas. And Petrarch then used that understanding, this new feeling for the classics to help him develop his plan for writing, and he became a very well-known poet. And instead of writing about love, like we often talked about with the troubadours, instead of writing about the fights of the knights, Petrarch is writing about nature, and this idea of love between people is the most natural thing. Now, Petrarch was considered the first of many humanist authors. And then Leonardo da Vinci, you know a lot about Da Vinci, and I have a video for you here in a little bit that you need to go to check out some more art here. I'm not showing that to you here, just telling you about them. But you'll need to go look at some others available here soon. Da Vinci was the true Renaissance man. The idea of a Renaissance man, meaning somebody who can do everything, was begun by Leonardo da Vinci. Because Da Vinci has created some spectacular paintings. Well, you'll recognize a number of them when you get a chance to look here shortly. But he wasn't just a painter, he was also a sculptor. He was a scientist. There are multiple shows on History Channel that talk about the things that Da Vinci believed in, what he drew, the ideas that he came up with, but the technology wasn't available yet to be able to create. He came up with tanks made out of wood, powered by men inside just pushing it around. He came up with an idea for a helicopter, but wasn't able to actually create it. So Da Vinci had some spectacular stuff. He had a great scientific mind. He did a lot of measurement and study of the human body, and that goes back to that humanist idea, the classics. Just like the Romans and the Greeks focused on the human body, Da Vinci was really, really careful about maintaining realism. And realism, the idea of science applied to art. And a good example of that is the Mona Lisa and even the Vitruvian Man. That's that picture of a man in the center with his arms and legs out with a circle and a square around it. And you've seen Mrs. Hartwig wearing a necklace that has the Vitruvian Man on it as well. And another guy to consider, another artist, Michelangelo. Michelangelo is well known as a painter and sculptor of the Renaissance. Probably two of his most well-known works are the Sistine Chapel ceiling and David, a sculpture of David from the Bible, David and Goliath. A sculpture of David standing with his slingshot over his shoulder. And another guy, Donatello. Donatello is well known as a sculptor. He tried out lots of materials like marble and bronze. So with marble, he sculpted directly out of the stone, cut pieces away to make things, and that's very much like the Greeks and the Romans from over 1,000 years before. And then bronze is going the other way. You're sculpting you can sculpt out of something more simple, maybe clay, and then create a mold on the outside, open it up, take the clay out, and then on the inside you pour bronze and let it harden and cool. And now you have the bronze statue inside, and if you get a chance to watch the show Monument Makers, I believe, on History Channel, it's pretty impressive. It's something, these guys are doing something very similar to what Donatello did with them. And then this guy, not an artist himself, but Cosimo de' Medici. He didn't make the art, he paid for the art. Now, for these guys up here to be able to do things, He had to have somebody to support him. And so Cosimo de' Medici was part of the de' Medici family, and he lived in Florence, Italy. He was one of those nobles whose family had moved into the town and grown the town, and he had made tons and tons of money, and so he spent his money on great art. He helped pay for great buildings to be built, and for sculptures to be made and paintings to be done. And so if it wasn't for families like the de' Medicis, the art would not have been created.